There's a quiet moment in every soldier's life that no one talks about. It doesn't come in the heat of battle or the noise of a homecoming parade. It comes in a quiet office, under fluorescent lights, with a pen in hand and a simple piece of paper in front of them, the DD214. It doesn't look like much, just a few typed lines on government stationery, but that piece of paper carries more weight than any duffel bag ever slung over a shoulder. It's the final handshake, the curtain call, the moment the military says, "You're done. Thank you for your service. You're free to go." Most civilians have never heard of it. For veterans, though, it's unforgettable. DD214 is the certificate of release or discharge from active duty, the last document you get before stepping out of uniform and back into the world. It lists where you served, how long, what rank you held, the medals you earned, and the day the military officially let you go. Some carry it proudly. Others tuck it away in the back of a drawer, never wanting to look at it again. But every vet remembers the moment it was handed to them. For some, it felt like winning a war. For others, it felt like losing everything. One Marine who fought in Fallujah once said, "The day they gave me my DD214, I felt weightless, like I was floating, finally free. But I also felt lost, like someone had cut my anchor." Because what the DD214 doesn't say, what it can't say, is what it cost you to earn it. It doesn't show the friendships buried on foreign soil. It doesn't record the dreams you left behind or the nightmares that would follow you home. It doesn't mention the silence in your house after midnight when you wake up sweating, heart pounding, wondering why you're not still out there. It doesn't talk about the way your kids look at you like a stranger, or how you stand in a grocery aisle staring at cereal boxes, overwhelmed by a world that feels both too fast and too empty. It's just a piece of paper, but it's the line between one life and another, and when you cross it, you begin the second war, the one no one prepared you for. Some veterans clutch their DD214 like it's a lifeline. They need it for everything: to apply for VA health care, to qualify for a home loan, to prove to an employer they served with honor. But it's strange. For a document so essential, it feels oddly impersonal, bureaucratic, cold. Imagine this. You give the military your youth. You give it your back, your knees, your hearing, your peace of mind. You follow orders without question. You fight in places that don't show up on maps. And one day someone calls your name and slides a piece of paper across the desk. And that's it. There's no translation for that feeling. You walk out into the world, DD214 in hand, maybe with a duffel bag, maybe with a box of medals you haven't decided where to put. Your haircut is still too sharp. Your boots still walk in formation. You still check every corner like it's a habit that might save your life. But the world doesn't salute anymore. It doesn't wait for you to catch up. It barely notices you came home. The DD214 says you're a civilian now. It says you're free, but you don't feel free. You feel untethered. And freedom, when you've lived too long under rules and structure, can feel like chaos. One Army vet recalled staring at his DD214 for days after coming home from Iraq. "I kept reading it like maybe I missed something," he said. "Like maybe there was a line that would explain how to be normal again." But it was just blank space. The document isn't emotional, but the life behind it is. Every crease in that paper holds a memory. For some, it's pride. For others, regret. For many, it's both. There are stories of vets laminating their DD214 and carrying it in their wallet. Others have lost it in moves only to desperately search years later because they need proof of service just to be seen by the system they once belonged to. It becomes your passport to veteran life, but it's also a goodbye letter to the uniform, the brotherhood, the structure, and the self you were before the war shaped you into something else. And no matter how long you served, how many battles you faced, or how many nights you prayed for it all to end, when you finally get that DD214 in your hand, the world doesn't pause to acknowledge the journey. It just hands you the paper and moves on. Some never talk about it. Some frame it. Some burn it. But every vet carries it, if not in their pocket, then in their bones. Because that document doesn't just end your service, it marks the start of something else. A civilian life that doesn't come with a manual. A society that thanks you at the airport but forgets you at the hospital. A job market that says, "Thank you for your service," before asking if you've adjusted. A world that rarely asks what it took to make it home. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to trade a battlefield for a boardroom, to go from sand and sweat to a desk and silence, the DD214 is the door. And once you walk through, you can't go back. It's a simple piece of paper. But for those who've lived through war, through loss, through nights without sleep and days without peace, it's the heaviest paper in the world. And maybe that's why it's so hard for many veterans to talk about it. Because no matter how neatly it's printed or how official it looks, there's something missing in every DD214, the human cost. So when you meet a veteran, know this. You're not just shaking hands with someone who served. You're meeting someone who carries a story in every blank space of that form. A name, a date, a discharge code. But behind each word is a memory. Behind each line is a war. And somewhere in a file drawer or a locked box under a bed, that story lives on paper. But more importantly, it lives in them. If this story moved you, and if you believe stories like these deserve to be told, we invite you to subscribe to U.S. Veteran Tales, because some battles are fought overseas, but some are still being fought right here in silence. Let's keep remembering. Let's keep listening. When the military lets you go, it doesn't send you home with a roadmap. There's no compass for civilian life, no guidebook titled How to Be Normal Again. All you get is the DD214, a form with your name, your service record, your discharge status. It tells the world you're done, but it never tells you how to begin again. For many veterans, the first few weeks after discharge are quiet, unnaturally quiet. No reveille, no formation, no orders barked from across the yard, just time. Long, empty hours that stretch out like unfamiliar land. Some try to enjoy it, sleep in, take walks, reconnect with family, but often, underneath the surface, there's a sense of unease. The military had a rhythm, predictable, hard, structured, and within that hardness, there was purpose. Out here, with no one telling you what's next, that structure collapses, and so many veterans begin to drift, not aimlessly, but uncertainly. They try to find work. They polish resumes, put on collared shirts, and learn to say, "Yes, sir," to a manager who's never known war. Some are lucky. They land jobs. Others are told their experience doesn't translate. How do you explain to someone that you once led a fire team through a hostile village when now they ask if you've ever used Excel? The DD214 says, infantryman. It says sergeant. It says honorable discharge. But it doesn't say you're qualified to work in an office. It doesn't say you know how to sit through meetings or make small talk or be okay with people who complain about traffic like it's the end of the world. No, the DD214 doesn't explain any of that. And then there's the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs. Veterans walk through its doors with hope, and sometimes they find help. But just as often, they find lines, paperwork, delays, appeals, more forms. We need your DD214, they're told, and your medical records and proof of injury. Proof of injury? What kind of proof do you show for the dreams that wake you up gasping, for the constant scan of the room when you enter a restaurant, for the dull ache in your back that never left since carrying 80 pounds of gear day after day? One Navy vet once said, "I brought them my DD214, my medals, and my scar." They still ask for more. Another joked darkly, "You can get blown up and lose your leg, but if the paperwork isn't stamped, it's like it never happened." So veterans learn to fight a different kind of battle, the bureaucratic one. A war of signatures, case numbers, and follow-up calls. And all the while, they carry that paper, the DD214, as proof they belong to a system that often forgets their names. Some do manage to rebuild. They go back to school, start businesses, become counselors, teachers, mentors. They pour their discipline and focus into new missions. But even then, even with success, there are days that feel hollow. Because no matter how far they go, part of them is still standing in formation, still watching that gate, still hearing the helicopter blades overhead. The DD214 didn't just mark the end of their service. It marked a permanent change in identity. In the military, you wear your name, your branch, your rank. You know who you are. After discharge, those things are stripped away. Now you're just a person. And for many, just a person feels like less than who they used to be. That's why some veterans grow out their beards, wear their old dog tags around their necks, or hang flags in their living rooms, not to live in the past, but to anchor themselves to something real, something that still feels like them. And then there's the loneliness. Most civilians don't ask about service. Some are afraid. Others are unsure what to say. Some veterans prefer it that way, but others wish someone would ask, not to pry, but to understand. A veteran once said, "The hardest part wasn't what I saw over there. It was coming back and realizing no one would ever truly understand." That kind of isolation doesn't show up on any form, but it lives in the silence between conversations, in the smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. There are veterans who build a new life and never look back. Others try to go back, to re-enlist, to serve again, to chase the clarity of purpose they once had. And some fall through the cracks. Homelessness, addiction, suicide, these are not just headlines. They are realities. For thousands of veterans, the DD214 didn't open a door to freedom. It dropped them into a world with no parachute. One Vietnam vet living out of his car once said, "They gave me a form. They gave me a handshake. And then the world moved on. But I stayed stuck." His DD214 was in the glove compartment, folded, faded, still his last connection to the uniform he once wore with pride. But this isn't the story of hopelessness. It's a story of truth. And in that truth, there is also resilience. Because for every veteran who struggles, there is one who rises, who joins a support group, who checks on their brothers and sisters, who advocates, volunteers, marches, speaks, who takes that same DD214, the one that ended a chapter, and uses it to build a new one. A former Army medic once stood in front of a high school class to talk about his service. He brought his DD214 with him, laminated, marked with highlights. He told the students, "This paper is my history, but it's not my definition. What you do after the uniform matters just as much as what you did in it." He's right, because at its core, the DD214 is just that, paper. But the life that follows, that's still being written every day. The truth is, the war doesn't always end with a signature on the DD214. It lingers in memory, in body, in spirit. But it also evolves. What begins as a quiet battle against pain and loss sometimes becomes something else entirely, a mission of meaning. For many veterans, it takes time, sometimes years, sometimes decades. But eventually, a moment comes, quiet, unremarkable, and yet unforgettable, when they begin to reclaim something they thought they'd lost, themselves, not the soldier self, not the uniform or the rank, but the person who existed before and the person who endured, a whole self, cracked in places maybe, but still standing. This rediscovery rarely happens in dramatic ways. It unfolds in small victories. It's a father learning how to hold his child without flinching at loud noises. A mother who finally sleeps through the night without gripping the edge of the bed. A veteran who walks into a crowded restaurant and doesn't scan the exits. A man who hadn't laughed in years, chuckling at a dumb joke told by a stranger at the VA. The road back is long, and it's different for everyone. Some find peace through art, others in the woods, fishing rod in hand, some through faith or family or the fire of advocacy. There are veterans who spend their days helping others, guiding fellow vets through the tangle of VA forms, showing up at shelters, talking down friends from ledges both literal and emotional. They become beacons, not because they never broke, but because they learned how to carry their cracks with grace. One former paratrooper now works with homeless veterans. He keeps a copy of his DD214 in his wallet, not because he needs it anymore, but because it reminds him of the weight he once carried, and of the people still carrying theirs. He tells them, "This paper may have ended your time in the military, but it didn't end your purpose." Because that's the truth most veterans come to understand. The mission changes, but it never really ends. They may no longer serve in uniform, but they serve in other ways, as mentors, as protectors, as neighbors who show up. Their instincts to lead, to shield, to push forward in the face of adversity, those don't disappear, they just adapt. And yes, some wounds never fully heal. Some memories never soften. The sharp edge of loss may dull, but it doesn't vanish. Still, within that pain, something remarkable can grow. Empathy, strength, wisdom. There's a quiet strength in the way a veteran steps aside to help a stranger, in the way they pause, really listen, really see you, because they've been through silence. They've been unseen, and they know what that feels like. The DD214 might list dates and medals, but it doesn't account for all the lives that soldier touched, all the times they were the steady hand, the calming voice, the one who carried someone else, literally or figuratively, when they couldn't carry themselves. And sometimes that's where the healing begins, not just in being seen, but in seeing others, in realizing you're not alone, that someone else understands, that someone else is walking that same road. Veterans often find each other without words, in the nods across crowded rooms, in the eyes that linger just a moment longer, in the small jokes only someone who served would understand. They form communities, small, quiet, powerful, online and offline, in garages and coffee shops, in group therapy and motorcycle clubs, in church basements and fishing boats. And through those connections, through those shared experiences, many veterans come to redefine what their DD214 truly meant. Not an ending, not just a goodbye, but a certificate of survival, a marker of endurance. One Gulf War vet described it perfectly. He said, "My DD214 didn't set me free. It told me I had more work to do. Not for the military, not for the government, but for myself, for my brothers and sisters, for the people who didn't come home." For every veteran who made it home, there's a sense of responsibility to live for those who couldn't, to speak when others no longer can, to remember even when the world forgets. And that remembrance, that act of holding space for what was lost, is powerful. It's what makes stories like these matter. It's what makes your story, listening now, matter too. So if you've served, or if someone you love has served, know this: you are more than your DD214. You are more than the dates and the discharge status. You are a chapter still unfolding. You are part of a legacy that didn't end when the war did. And if you're someone who's never worn the uniform, but you're here, listening, learning, trying to understand, then thank you. Because that's where healing begins too. With listening, with remembering, with not letting the silence swallow these stories whole. We tell these stories because they deserve to be heard. Because somewhere a veteran sits in silence with a folded DD214 in a drawer and wonders if anyone remembers what it took to earn it. So let's remember. Let's keep telling their stories. Let's keep listening, gently, patiently, openly. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to U.S. Veteran Tales. Your support helps us share more stories, real, honest, human, from those who've worn the uniform and walked the long road home. Subscribe, like, and share this video, not just for the algorithm, but for the memory of every veteran who still carries that one piece of paper and everything that came with it. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. This has been U.S. Veteran Tales. We remember, we listen, we tell their stories.